Hi there, friend. My name is John Werner. I used to be a part of the largest cult in the United States. After studying the Bible, Christian history, and ministry, I set my sights on confronting the problematic nature of white evangelicalism in the United States. In 2019, I published my first book as a first step in addressing the subtle issues of this complex system. This podcast will continue that work under the same title. Welcome to The Cult of Christianity.
As a kid, my dad's love for the Beatles was infectious. Anytime their song came on the radio, the volume knob was getting cranked. And old Ed Sullivan clips of their larger-than-life fame were mesmerizing. My dad's guitar always sat in the corner, right by the piano, ready for a spontaneous jam session, but more often than Beatles songs, there were old Southern gospel songs about the gospel story. Only occasionally would it slip into the Fab Four. My dad's love for good music was only exceeded by his love for God, and every Sunday we would loudly sing many lesser quality songs. But I loved church just as much as my dad did. The choir, the wooden pew second from the front, we sat in every single Lord's Day, and the hymns that echoed through the sanctuary all gave me a sense of peace, but at the same time, I couldn't help feeling conflicted. The love that the Beatles sang about was so different from the love that was preached from the pulpit. The Beatles talked about love as a force that could bring people together, regardless of their differences. It was a love that rebelled against Puritanism and shouted for inclusivity in white, straight spaces. It was a love that was free and open, unencumbered by rules or dogma. But the church taught that love was something more complex and demanding. It was about sacrifice, obedience, and a deep connection to God. I struggled to reconcile these two definitions of love. On one hand, I wanted to believe in the love that the Beatles sang about, a love that was universal and all-encompassing. But on the other hand, I also wanted to believe in the love that the church taught, a love that was rooted in faith, active choices, and obedience to God. The Beatles' message of love, while beautiful and inspiring, was somewhat idealistic and lacked a sense of groundedness. The love that my church preached, on the other hand, was focused on obedience and submission to a higher power, which left little room for individuality and self-expression. Both approaches are certainly incomplete. Love is not just a feeling, but a choice to be kind, compassionate, and understanding. Love was not just about acceptance, but also about accountability, holding ourselves and others responsible for our actions and the impact they have on the world around us. But the Beatles' version of love had a clear advantage over my cult's messaging. The Beatles' message of love celebrated diversity and encourages us to see beauty in everyone, regardless of our differences. In contrast, the evangelical definition of love was narrow-minded and exclusionary, placing strict moral and behavioral codes on people that led to judgment, discrimination, and division. But what about other aspects of love? What about the way we love our partners, our families, and our friends? How does our culture shape our ideas about these types of love? And what impact does it have on our relationships? In Bible college, we talked about the many different Greek words there were for love, all four of them, to my best memory. And there are four major ideas attached to each word: Granted, some of this is heavily influenced by C.S. Lewis. While his ideas are borderline canonical to evangelical faith, often surprisingly with some of his views, he definitely took some creative liberties in his word studies. But here's what Moody Bible Institute homogenized within its students. The 4 Greek words are eros. This word is often associated with romantic love and physical desire. It's where the modern term erotic comes from. Eros was depicted as a young, handsome god who could cause overwhelming feelings of passion and desire. Philia. This word describes the love between friends and the bonds of camaraderie. It encompasses loyalty, trust, and a shared sense of purpose. It sounds like fidelity, an idea of faithfulness. Philia was considered one of the highest forms of love in Greek culture. Storge. This word refers to the love between family members and the bonds that form through shared experience and affection. It is often depicted as a natural and instinctive form of love that is unconditional. This could be like the shared love of humanity, or in Christian jargon, the love we share because we bear the image of God. Agape. This word describes selfless and unconditional love that is focused on the well-being of others. It is a spiritual love considered the highest form of love in Christianity. Agape involves a deep sense of compassion and empathy for others, and a willingness to put their needs before your own. While these categories are interesting, I swear Bible college students were obsessed with them, and they took these 4 loves as essential gospel. But I can think of different loves that work outside these definitions. Think of the love someone has for someone who's already passed away. Or what about the love for an animal? And don't even get me started on my love for art. These are very human understandings of very boring versions of love and limit the scope of what love could be. For some reason, and I'd argue a very specific reason, they were more focused on these Greek words than the Hebrew words for love. And here's 5 of them, though there are more. And these ideas are even more difficult to verify as credible. Ancient Hebrew is a very difficult language to confidently translate, especially into a language like English. But here they are, and forgive the botched pronunciations. Ahava. This word is often used to describe a God's love for humanity, or the love between humans and Yahweh. It is unconditional love that emphasizes commitment, loyalty, and sacrifice. Chesed. This word is often translated as loving kindness or mercy, and emphasizes acts of kindness and generosity towards others. It is a love that is shown through actions rather than words, and is often associated with the concept of charity, dodim. This word is used in the Song of Solomon to describe romantic love and physical desire between 2 lovers. Sex. It is often translated as beloved or lover, and emphasizes the passionate and intimate aspects of love. Raya. This word is often used to describe the love between friends or companions. It emphasizes the idea of friendship, camaraderie, and shared experiences, and is often translated as companion or friend. Rayuti. This word is similar to raya, but emphasizes an even deeper level of friendship and intimacy. It is often used to describe close, lifelong friendship, and is based on trust, loyalty, and shared values. Interestingly enough, the type of love Jonathan had for David in the Bible, it wasn't the romantic word. And it also wasn't the friend word. And it also wasn't even the deep friendship word, but rather the word for God-tier commitment. And just throwing that in there to show that the scholars who think David and Jonathan were gay could use a word study argument, as well as those who describe their love as just intense loyalty. And what's the lesson there? Don't use word studies as a main frame of reference for interpretation. It's bad scholarship, linguistics, and transparently bias. But I digress. The Hebrew words, and there are more than these 5, communicate more vaguely, while Greek, the more mathematical language, communicates systemically. It's not surprising to me that evangelicals would gravitate towards the latter for their framing. Also, they don't care about what's in the Old Testament like they frequently claim. It's a mere authoritative bludgeoning tool. They'll cherry pick when they feel like, rather than study all the beauty contained in their own goddamn book. Okay, still digressing. Okay, the point of this is to explain that love is a hard thing to communicate, especially by the time you're trying to understand the concept in English. Have you ever stopped to think about how we use the word love in English? It's a word that's thrown around a lot, but what does it mean? And why do we use it to describe everything from our favorite foods to our most intense romantic feelings? As a teenager, I remember grappling with these questions. I was always trying to figure out how to express my feelings for someone I was crushing on without using the word love too soon. It was a delicate dance. Saying I like them felt too mild, but I love them felt like too much. The word love in English is confusing beyond just romantic relationships. We use it to describe all kinds of things that we enjoy or appreciate, like our favorite foods or movies, and that's because the word love is versatile. It can express a range of emotions from simple pleasure to deep, intense passion. This versatility is reflected in the linguistic history of the word love in English. Love has roots in both Germanic and Romance languages and has evolved to encompass a wide range of meanings and contexts. But at its core, Americans use the word love when they invest emotional energy into something, whether it's a person, a hobby, or a piece of music. But we have a fear of investing emotional energy into people. We're happy to pour our hearts into our careers, our public image, and the content we consume. But when it comes to investing that same level of emotional energy into relationships, we can be hesitant. And part of this hesitancy may stem from the fact that we've become a society that values individualism and self-sufficiency. We're taught from a young age to be independent and to rely on ourselves. While this can be an important and empowering message, it can also make it harder for us to form deep, meaningful connections with others. It also becomes an increasingly ridiculous ideology in the face of more and more financial oppression from capitalism, rewarding evil overlords and punishing regular people. That, coupled with the rise of social media, has changed the way we interact with each other forever. We're able to curate our online personas, presenting only the best and most attractive parts of ourselves to the world. This can make it difficult to form authentic connections with others, as we may feel pressure to present ourselves in a certain internet-friendly way, even when we're not on the internet. Social media has given us access to an endless stream of information and entertainment. We can spend hours scrolling through Instagram or news or binge watching Netflix, consuming content that has been carefully crafted to grab and hold our attention. This is more addictive than enjoyable, and it distracts us from forming real connections with others. Ultimately, investing emotional energy into relationships can be scary. It requires vulnerability, trust, and the willingness to put ourselves out there. But if we're willing to take that risk, the rewards are typically a life worth living. Deep, meaningful connections with others can bring us joy fulfillment, belonging. But this fear of vulnerability can be especially paralyzing. We're scared of showing our worst parts to others and revealing our true, complete selves. We worry about being rejected or judged. We don't want to be seen as clingy or needy. So we keep our emotions in check. This fear of vulnerability can manifest in different ways. We might avoid close relationships altogether, preferring to keep things surface level with acquaintances and colleagues, or we might engage in casual hookups we'd rather not have done, or jump into relationships because we're scared of being vulnerable. And either way, we're just trying to avoid the emotional intimacy that comes with platonic friends, deeper connections, all sorts of relationships. And of course, this fear of vulnerability is not unique to Americans, but in some cultures, there is a greater emphasis on community and collective support. People are more likely to rely on each other for emotional support and prioritize relationships over individual achievement in those cultures. And being vulnerable in those cultures is seen as a strength, not a weakness. In American culture, however, the fear of vulnerability can be especially pervasive. The irony of a whole culture feeling alone in their feelings is baffling. And I could make the argument, and I will, that this loneliness serves the 1% cockalorum. It benefits them for us to not be united in our need for each other. It's not a hard argument to make. A tale that is old as time is oppressive regimes dividing to conquer. But what few might initially recognize is that strategy is not just the government's sometimes. It serves cultists as well. As a preacher approaches a stage, crowds might erupt in applause or smile in anticipation. They have come from far and wide to hear his words of wisdom and to be a part of this divine decreeing. They believe in him, trust him, and love him. But what they often don't know is that they are being manipulated. This is the story of how cult leaders take advantage of a society confused and afraid of deeper meanings of love. We live in a society that is more cyber connected than ever before. But paradoxically, we are also so isolated. We confuse surface level connections with a deep relationship. This has left many people feeling vulnerable, confused. We want love, but we are afraid of being hurt. Even when we think we belong to a community, we still tiptoe around them because we're afraid of being judged or rejected by our allies and adversaries. And that's where cult leaders enter in. They prey on our fears and insecurities, promising to provide us with love and acceptance we so desperately crave. They create a sense of belonging, of being part of something bigger than us. But the love they offer is not genuine. It is conditional and manipulative. They may shower their followers with attention and affection only to withdraw it later when they don't do what the cult needs them to do, and when they don't give what the cult demands, which is total submission. Cult leaders are experts at using fear and guilt to control their followers. They tell them that they are the chosen ones, that they have a special purpose, and that if they leave the group, they will be lost forever. And before their followers can even realize what's happening, they are trapped in a web of lies and manipulation, unable to escape. It's a scary thought, but the truth is that we are all vulnerable to these tactics. We all crave love and acceptance, and when we feel lost or alone, we are more susceptible to being manipulated. In the case of Christian leaders, they have perfected the art of using guilt, shame, and fear to control their followers. They present themselves as holding the only source of truth and salvation and insist that their followers must obey their every command, better put, pastoral whim, to avoid eternal damnation. This creates a deep sense of anxiety, which the leader can use to control their followers, contain their loyalty, and convert generation upon generation. Many cults do many bad things, much worse than anything I've witnessed in Christianity sometimes. But the sustainability of the Christian cult terrifies me. The ability to adapt to culture after culture, century after century, person after person. They are geniuses at what they do. Their ability to thread the needle of just enough abuse to traumatize millions, but not enough to receive proper scrutiny, is worthy of exponentially more research than has ever been conducted. Ironically, this passion against the cult of Christianity does not come from bitterness or hate, but love. I know I don't always sound that way, but the cult of Christianity is so functionally anti-love in their brainwashing. They prevent what I hope to spread. Christian leaders count on a confusion between love and obedience. And that has lasting impacts on an individual's mental health and well-being. People who have been conditioned to equate obedience with love may struggle with setting healthy boundaries or asserting their own needs and desires. They will struggle with feelings of guilt or shame even when they have done nothing wrong. In extreme cases, this confusion can also lead to trauma and PTSD. Victims of abuse who have been conditioned to equate obedience with love may struggle with feelings of helplessness and powerlessness even after they have escaped the abusive situation. They will struggle with trust and intimacy because they've learned to associate love with control and manipulation. This confusion can also lead to cycles of abuse. Abusive leaders use language that equates obedience with love to manipulate their followers, creating a dynamic where people feel that they must obey to be loved and accepted, and also that they must be obeyed to be loved and accepted. As the cult leader to cult follower dynamic continues, most victims end up becoming perpetrators themselves. They internalize the belief of obedience equaling love, and they use the same tactics to control others, perpetuating the cycle of abuse. And this creates a culture of mistrust where everyone is on edge and looking out for themselves. The effects of this cycle of abuse can be devastating for individuals and communities alike. And I am Exhibit A. I believed, sometimes subconsciously and sometimes actively, that if I obeyed the authority figures in my life, God would bless me more. It seemed simple enough at the time. But as I grew older, I began to see in my behavior the darker side of this equation. When I got married, I found myself being dismissive and neglectful of my wife. I thought that if she loved me, she would obey me. And I couldn't understand why she didn't seem to appreciate my leadership. It wasn't until years later that I realized how toxic my thinking had been and how fatal that line of thinking was in the demise of our relationship. Scarier still, as a youth pastor, I took this idea of obedience further. I believe that I was doing teenagers a favor by teaching them to obey authority figures. But I was creating a culture of shame. And I could even recognize the damage that my approach was causing, but I couldn't see a way out of this cycle. It wasn't until I hit rock bottom, a homeless, divorced drunk, that I began to understand the full extent of the damage I had done through this idea of love equals obedience. I had become a closed off shell of a man who couldn't trust anyone. I had lost touch with my own emotions and couldn't connect with people around me. I was eternally alone and miserable. And I knew that something had to change. And it took years of therapy and self-reflection. But I eventually learned to let go of my toxic beliefs and embraced a healthier understanding of love. But I still haven't fully forgiven myself for my past actions. And at times I was so gleeful participating in that evangelical cycle of abuse. It's hard to forgive. And being an ex-Christian can complicate one's ability to forgive themselves for such behavior in several ways. I mean, first, Christian teachings emphasize the importance of forgiveness, but often with the caveat that forgiveness is only possible through faith in God. And as an ex-Christian, I embarrassingly struggle with the belief that forgiveness is even possible without a divine being to grant it. I know it's not true, but I don't always feel that way. Christian teachings emphasize the concept of sin and the need for repentance to be forgiven, this idea of turning away to something. And without that framework of Christianity, I struggle to understand how to make amends for past wrongs and find closure through apologies when they're helpful and restitution personally and externally. And having a theological template helps with logical reconciliation with oneself, but that template is hard to translate when you're discovering who you are outside of the cult. But leaving a religious community can also result in a loss of identity, which can make it difficult to find a sense of purpose. And this loss can exacerbate feelings of guilt and shame from past behavior, as one may feel that they have lost their moral compass or sense of direction. And it's not just me. Many ex-Christians struggle with the realization that their past behavior was influenced by their religious beliefs. At minimum, it was influenced. And this can create a sense of dissonance or conflict within oneself. You don't feel like you're acting authentically or even true to yourself. And for me, it's sometimes an eternal identity crisis. And all these factors can make it challenging for ex-Christians to come to terms with their past behavior and find a way to forgive themselves. It may require a process of redefining one's values and beliefs, seeking support from a new community, and finding ways to make amends. But more than all of that, it's about realizing that forgiveness of the self is an essential element of self-love. Forgiving ourselves requires that we confront the reality of our mistakes and the impact they have had on ourselves and others. This can be so difficult, especially for those who have internalized the messaging that self-worth is tied to obedience and perfection. Not necessarily one's own perfection, but the perfection of Christ. Even that tie can make things so hard. But it's only by facing the truth of our actions and taking responsibility for them that we can begin to move forward and heal. Through the process of forgiveness, we learn to treat ourselves with kindness and understanding, recognizing that we are all imperfect human beings who make mistakes. We can acknowledge the pain we have caused, and we can make amends while also recognizing our inherent value and worth. We are not determined by our worst parts or worst moments. In this way, self-forgiveness is a key component of self-love. It allows us to let go of the past and move forward with compassion and empathy, both for ourselves and for others. And here is a good point to address a slight nuance that should get more attention in pop culture. In my opinion, the phrase, "you have to love yourself first before you can love others," is problematic because it simplifies a very complex issue. When I was going through my divorce, I heard this phrase a lot, and I found it unhelpful and hurtful. I knew I made mistakes in my marriage, and it was 100% my fault that we didn't work out. But my struggle to love myself was not the only problem. It was a problem, but it was way more complex than that. You see, I did love some parts of myself, some parts I wish I hadn't loved about myself. Some parts were probably fine. I mean, I had a good job and a strong sense of purpose, and I tried to have some fun with the hobbies I enjoyed. But I was struggling to love my wife in the way she needed and deserved. I was dismissive of her feelings, neglectful of her needs, and didn't prioritize our relationship at all. It wasn't merely because I didn't love myself enough. It was because I didn't understand how to love someone else. Growing up, I struggled with self-love, and more often I just exercised self-hate to an extreme degree. And I still continued to pour my heart into others. It wasn't the healthiest love, but it was still a valid love that had profound meaning. You can love others deeply and still struggle with self-love, just as you can work on loving yourself and still have room to grow in how you love others. The truth is that both self-love and love for others requires effort and intention, and they are both essential for a healthy and fulfilling life. When I did start to love myself more, and I'm still working on it, it didn't magically make me better at loving others. There were so many growing pains along the way, and I had to learn how to set boundaries, communicate my needs and desires, and prioritize my well-being. But through that journey, I realized that self-love is not a destination. It is a trip. It is an adventure of growth and discovery. It requires patience, compassion, and a willingness to be vulnerable to ourselves. And while it may not always feel easy or comfortable, it is worth it to build a strong foundation of self-love and simultaneously love others more fully and authentically. So, no, I don't think it's fair or accurate to say that you must love yourself first before you can love others. Yeah, self-love is important, but it's not the only factor in being able to love someone else. It's about learning how to empathetically communicate with another person. And that's a process that takes time and effort. It's about being willing to acknowledge your flaws and work on them while also being willing to learn and grow alongside others. And this might sound like a hair split, and it is a hair split, admittedly. I think the phrase is trying to shorthand an important concept. When we love ourselves more, we get more practice at love. When we spend more time with ourselves than anyone, it makes sense that we should love ourselves. I mean, it's a matter of practicing. I have often said on other podcasts that ask for, what's your advice? I'll say it's to be vulnerable with yourself first. It's important to be honest with others. And it's impossible to be honest with others when you're lying to yourself. But I think love is more than honesty, though love certainly requires honesty. But by taking care of our own needs, facing our hardest vulnerabilities, and practicing self-compassion, we are better able to show up fully for the people in our life. When we are rested, nourished, and emotionally balanced, we are more patient, present, and empathetic towards others. We are able in much better ways to listen actively, to offer support, and connect on a deeper level. When we practice self-love, we model the behavior we want to see in others. When we prioritize our well-being, we show others that it is okay to do the same. This can create a positive ripple effect, inspiring those around us to also prioritize their self-care and autonomy. On the other hand, when we neglect our own needs and are unkind to ourselves, we are more likely to become frustrated, irritable, and disconnected from others. We may struggle to listen or connect on a deeper level, and we may unintentionally take our frustrations out on those around us. And that is what a lack of self-love did to me. Studying to be an evangelical pastor, I emphasize the importance of love as surrendering to God's will. I truly believed that God loved me, and I wanted to show that same love to others. However, I took this message so literally that I believed that to be loving, I had to control others. I thought that if I could just get others to follow God's will, they would experience the same love and hope of heaven that I did. I wasn't really experiencing that much. I felt that I was doing the right thing by trying to influence those around me, even though it often came at the expense of respecting their autonomy. I realize now that my mindset was not only not healthy, it wasn't loving. It was controlling and manipulative. I was projecting my ideas and beliefs onto others rather than allowing them to make their own choices and find their paths. I was convinced that God loved me by controlling me, and I believe that I was doing the same for others. It took a long time to confront my fears and insecurities and learn to let go of my need for control. And some days I'm still working on it. I had to learn to trust that others could and should make their own choices. I wish I had learned that sooner. True love is not about controlling others, but rather about letting go of our ego and respecting and honoring the power of others, even when it is difficult or uncomfortable. And that is a deeper love than anything in the Bible. But it doesn't sound like that when you're inside Christianity, or frankly, any cult. In many cults, there is a strong emphasis on love and unity among members, often to the exclusion of outsiders. Members may be encouraged or required to develop close, intimate relationships with one another, often under the guise of fostering a sense of family or community. These relationships can be highly emotional and intense, with members often feeling a deep sense of connection and loyalty to one another. I mean, I certainly felt physical reactions to my love for fellow Christians while we were all singing praises or praying together. However, this sense of love and connection is highly conditional. Members are expected to conform to strict codes of behavior and belief, and those who do not are ostracized, ignored, and or punished. Members are discouraged from forming close relationships outside of the group, and they might even be forbidden from doing so altogether. Honestly, the love and unity within cults, while not always ingenuine at first, are used as a tool for control. Leaders use the sense of belonging and acceptance to manipulate and exploit members, or to encourage them to engage in behaviors that are harmful to themselves or others. Members are told that their love for the group and its ideals should supersede any other loyalties or commitments they might have, whether it be indoctrination, personality, or upbringing. So much of how I understood love was in the context of loyalty. Love and loyalty have always been intertwined in the human experience, and their relationship can often be a complicated one. Linguistically, the word love comes from the Old English word lufu, which meant feeling of love, affection, friendliness. Love associated with strong emotions and affection. Nothing too different from now. But on the other hand, the word loyalty has a different origin, coming from the Latin word legalis, meaning of our belonging to the law. Loyalty is more about a sense of obligation or duty. When we are loyal to someone or something, we feel a sense of commitment and responsibility to them, often rooted in a sense of shared values or ideals. But the confusion between love and loyalty is perpetuated by societal messages that emphasize the importance of loyalty and devotion, often at the expense of individual well-being. In situations such as abusive relationships or high control groups, individuals may feel a sense of loyalty to their abuser or the group, even while they are being mistreated. This can make it difficult for them to leave or seek any kind of help, as they may feel they are betraying love. They're betraying their sense of loyalty or duty. Understanding the differences between love and loyalty is crucial in navigating healthy relationships. It was something I did a terrible job at in both my marriage and friendships. Now, I will say this about loyalty. Loyalty can mean staying committed to one's partner through both good times and bad. It can mean being faithful and devoted, even when faced with challenges or disagreements. Loyalty can also mean supporting one's partner in their goals and dreams and being willing to make sacrifices for the relationship. In friendships, loyalty can mean being there for one's friend in a time of need. It can mean being a reliable and trustworthy confidant and sticking by one's friends through their hardest times. And even in family relationships, loyalty can play an important role. Children feel a sense of loyalty to their parents and vice versa. And siblings may feel a strong sense of loyalty and connection to each other, even as they grow older and pursue their own lives. And I don't think that loyalty is bad. But it is not an essential element of love. It's just one way of communicating love. And that's the thing I've noticed about people. Humans don't communicate based on rigid definitions, but rather on connotations. Words mean different things to different people. And because of that, a broad idea, like the idea of love, is so difficult for us to communicate well. I've seen many people struggle with expressing love effectively in their relationships of all kinds. One really common challenge is that individuals may have different default settings. For example, some people may prioritize physical touch while others may prefer affirmative language, and we all need some amounts of both. But when partners or loved ones have different ways of expressing love, they may have difficulty interpreting and understanding one another. But a bigger issue is the impact of societal messages around love. Media portrayals of love are idealized, romanticized, and quite misogynistic, leading individuals to believe that love should always be easy, effortless, and a game of damsel and knight. And this can make it difficult to navigate the complexities and challenges of real life relationships, which includes disagreements, misunderstandings, emotional turmoil, and lifestyles that should do more than appeal a male gaze. More universally, past experiences impact an individual's ability to express and receive love. Trauma or just negative experiences can create barriers to vulnerability and emotional openness, making it challenging to connect with others. So, it makes sense to me that we often stop the conversation when it comes to investigating what love is. There are simpler words and simpler ideas that we can understand. Affection sounds like expressing admiration, which sounds like fondness, which sounds like familiarity, which sounds like tenderness, which sounds inclusive, which sounds like sweetness, which sounds friendly, which sounds casual, which sounds freeing, which sounds passionate, which sounds intense, which sounds like intimacy, which sounds exclusive, which sounds like a partnership, which sounds like warmth, which sounds like home, which sounds like belonging. And love somehow encompasses all of that. but we rank values as humans, and life is hard. So we might define our love more by its passion than its casualness, which is fine, but might be limiting. Some probably value the idea of home over the idea of freedom to explore. And that's great, but why not both? Well, the answer to why not both is because perfect love can never be expressed or received. That's the appeal of the cult of Christianity. It argues that God is perfect love, but their argument is weak when their dogma is examined. I must talk about umbrella theology when it comes to understanding Christian love. It's not because all Christians advocate for this structure so explicitly, but the fact that it is present in most evangelical sects shows what is permissible, dare I say coherent, under a Christian framework. Especially since love and obedience are confused in the religion as a whole because of the teachings of the Bible. So what is umbrella theology? Umbrella theology is a theological concept that originated in Christian circles, particularly conservative ones, and refers to a hierarchical system in which authority flows from God down through various levels of authority. So under umbrella theology, the father is seen as the head of the family and responsible for making decisions for his household, while the mother's role is to support and submit to her husband's authority. Children are expected to obey both parents and follow the family's religious beliefs and practices. And the father's leadership is supposedly informed by his connection to God, but more practically, it is in parroting the male pastor of their church. So the shorthand goes, children listen to mom, who listens to father, who listens to pastor, who listens to God. And everyone has to listen to God. But the lower you are on the totem pole, the more umbrellas of authority are over you. And the idea of umbrella theology is traced back to biblical passages that discuss the roles of men and women in the family and the church, but functionally, it is justified abusive behavior, specifically towards women and children. The idea is profoundly ridiculous, but it is not as uncommon as we might wish. My problem with the cult of Christianity is that it cannot divorce the idea of love from its religious terminology. It can't do it unless you throw out the Bible or reinterpret it based on current cultural expectations. And either way, the ideas become baseless, and the clever rhetoric will slip in here. The cult rhetoric goes something like, everybody worships something, or we all choose to devote our lives to something. The idea behind this rhetoric is that everyone has some sort of guiding principle or belief system, and that the cult's particular system is just as valid as any other. But this rhetoric can be a powerful tool for cults to deflect criticism and manipulate their members. By framing their beliefs as just one among many, they can argue that they are not doing anything different from what anyone else is doing, and that their beliefs are just as legitimate as anyone else's. And this can make it difficult for cult followers to recognize when they are being exploited. Cults might argue that if everyone is devoting their lives to something, then it's only natural that their members should be willing to make sacrifices for their beliefs. This creates a sense of exclusivity and superiority among the cult, and it makes it so difficult for cult followers to question or leave the group. It creates a sense of specialness among cult members by portraying their beliefs as just as valid as any other while also claiming to have exclusive access to truth. They already commit a logical fallacy, but for those not trained to spot such fallacies, the rhetoric goes unchecked. And it makes it difficult for members to question or leave the group, as they may feel they are giving up on something unique with value. The rhetoric of everybody worships something, or we all devote ourselves to something, is just used by cults and Christians to avoid criticism and justify bad behavior. But they're right about one thing. Everyone does want the secret to a loving life. Well, maybe not everyone, but the coolest people want the secret. And the search for true love is like a maze we navigate, each turn revealing a new obstacle. We stumble down winding paths, often lost, until we find ourselves standing at the entrance again. Our search is like a puzzle with missing pieces, and we turn to every source for answers. We search for the missing pieces between pages of a book, encoded in a movie's dialogue, or hidden in our best songs, hoping for the ultimate insight into what true love is. And as we search, we find love in unexpected places, like a butterfly that lands on our shoulders. We are captivated by its beauty, and its natural perches feels correct. Yet, like a rose with thorns, love can wound us deeply. We nurse our wounds, hoping to find the thing that just injured us. The search for true love is like a quest for buried treasure with no map and no certainty. We dig and dig and we dig deep, hoping to find the gold, often finding that the sand was worth more. And it's obnoxiously abundant, that sand gets everywhere its course. Yet we are not satisfied with the simplicity of a beach. Though the search may bring disappointment, we continue, fueled by the belief that true love is a reality. We take each step with care, never giving up hope, always searching. At the end of each episode, I leave you with the same message. Keep love in your life, hope in your heart, and searching in your soul. I say it casually as a nice tag, but I say it because it is a guiding sort of spirituality I vaguely ascribe to, in the sense that I think of deeper meaning than our surface level cultural buzzwords and cliches. Love is like the air we breathe. Without it, we cannot survive. It is a fundamental necessity for our very existence, and it gives us the strength to keep going even in the face of adversity. And hope, like the rhythm of our breath through our heart, allows us to breathe deeply, find solace in the present moment, and have curiosity toward the future. But searching internally and externally is also important. When we search within, we confront the fear and uncertainty that surrounds us outside. It's like taking a deep breath and exhaling all our worries, freeing ourselves to focus on the beauty and wonder of the present moment. But none of this high-level thinking, if you want to call it that, is possible without keeping love in our lives. When we love like it is our air, we get closer to a more fulfilled existence. We are more connected to the world around us, and we are surprised by joy. And if that sounds like C.S. Lewis or close to what a Christian might say, it's because it is. You see, the cult of Christianity is not making up everything. As we evolve and progress in what we aim toward, their language and rhetoric gets better, more generally understandable, and more poetically beautiful. But that doesn't make Christianity inherently progressive. I was raised in a devout Christian household. My parents took us to church every Sunday, multiple times a day, and I learned the stories of the Bible inside and out. Why? Why was I told it was essential to understand how to be a loving person, that I must read this thing in order to understand love? The goal of Christianity is not love. The fact is that religion developed in a time where the ultimate question of life was, how should I live? Not what would make me happy, and frankly, neither of those concepts serves love as the goal. I'm willing to sacrifice a bit of happiness for love, and maybe might even be okay with following some rules to communicate better with others. But I don't want love to be in service to obedience or happiness. The inverse is my personal goal. Take it or leave it. And that goal of mine is not new. Before I was even an adult, I saw the harm that the more fundamentalist teachings of Christianity were causing, particularly when it came to issues like queer rights and reproductive rights. I found myself wrestling with feelings of grief and disappointment, wondering how I could reconcile my love for my faith with my belief in loving all people. I thought loving all people was a part of Christianity, but it's not. It's a phrase used, but not a doctrine Christians show real devotion toward. When I distanced myself from the church, exploring different spiritual paths and philosophies to find a more balanced and nuanced perspective, it became clear that the cult was limiting me, not elevating me. But even as I moved away from evangelical Christianity, I couldn't deny the beauty and power of some of the teachings I had grown up with. When I go into churches now, usually to see what they're up to and to report on them, I feel uncomfortable and out of place often. But sometimes as the services go on, I find myself swept up in the emotion and energy of the crowd. For brief moments, it will feel like I have come full circle back to the hope of my childhood. But when the services end and the people begin to file out of the building, I come to my senses and I'm reminded of why cults are so dangerous. I realize that while the beautiful and powerful truths mentioned by evangelical Christians are uplifting and inspiring, they are not saying those truths for me, for you, or anybody except a select few. I could never go back to the blind faith of my childhood, not because I fully reject every single particular teaching, belief, or beautifully spun rhetorical exploration of the human condition. Some of those messages have shaped me into the person I am today, both the good and the bad. It was a roller coaster of emotions, of wrestling between the grief and freedom of leaving behind something I once loved, and the love and hate of the teachings themselves. But now, I live my life with a deep appreciation for the beauty and power of eternal truths, while remaining vigilant against those who could use such ideas for their gain. I've come to understand that the journey toward meaning and purpose in life is not always a smooth one, but that the ups and downs are the most compelling parts of what makes us human. Narratives provide more comfort than certainty, destinations, or some weird hope for an afterlife. But to illustrate how the Christian cult gets some things right, let me give my translation, with some creative liberties, to the most read scripture at weddings, 1 Corinthians 13. This is my rewriting of the Bible. Amidst tongues of men and the love of angels, I remain devoid of resounding brass or cymbals. Even if I fulfill prophecies and unravel all mysteries and knowledge, and have faith that moves mountains, without love I am not. Though I may give all that I possess, and my very being to be burned, without love it profits me nothing. Love is patient and enduring, never envious, nor lost, nor carried away. It does not delight in injustice, but finds joy in truth. It believes, hopes, and endures forevermore. Love never fails, even if prophecies do. Tongues fall silent, and knowledge fades away. For now we see through a glass darkly, but soon face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. But of faith, hope, and love, these three things shall abide, and the greatest of all is love. As I've said before, language is a tool for communication, and sometimes we use it to convey complex ideas that may require us to use poetry and prose. The passage about love in the New Testament is a good example of this. It speaks of love as a universal concept, one that is not limited to religious belief or dogma. Love is the glue that binds us together regardless of our individual beliefs. In the same vein, The passage argues that love is an action, not just a feeling. It is something that we can all practice regardless of our beliefs. Love requires patience and kindness, and it rejoices in discovering facts and narratives. Love is not just an abstract idea, but something that we can all practice. It is a force that drives us to be kind and compassionate, to show empathy and understanding. Love creates a sense of connection and belonging, a shared sense of purpose that transcends the individual ego. For those who do not believe in a divine being or supernatural force, love can still be seen as an evolutionary adaptation that helped our ancestors survive and thrive in groups. It is a trait that has been honed by millions of years of natural selection, and it continues to play an important role in our lives today. And that idea is no less beautiful to me. This passage about love from the New Testament can be seen as a universal concept that is not limited to religious belief. So where do evangelicals go wrong? Evangelicals, purposely or not, misunderstand 1 Corinthians 13 by focusing too much on its components and not enough on its overall message. Instead of recognizing that love could be the foundation of all Christian beliefs and practices, they choose to interpret this chapter as merely a laundry list of attributes Christians automatically receive by believing in God. They apply all the scripture about love selectively, using it to justify certain behaviors while ignoring others. For example, they emphasize the importance of love in a church community, but fail to extend that same love to marginalized groups or those with whom they disagree politically or ideologically. The way that evangelicals have historically interpreted 1 Corinthians 13 in the context of gender roles and relationships grinds my gears. Certain interpretations of this passage have been used to justify patriarchal structures and limit the role of women in the church and society. And if they can interpret such a beautiful passage of love as commanding hate, how much more damaging is the doctrine they just make up? We know cult leaders can be sneaky about how they manipulate their followers, and they do it by using the Bible to gaslight people. And I'm using that term to mean when someone messes with your head to make you question your sanity or memories. So how do they do it? Well, let's take 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter. It's all about how love is patient and kind, doesn't envy and boast, etc. We know it. But this is what the cult leaders do with the passage. They redefine love. Cult leaders say that their version of love is the only true love and anything else is a lie. So if you question their behavior, they'll say it's just tough love or God's loving wrath. Try figuring that one out. And they spiritualize everything. If you're not feeling loved by the cult, they might say that you're just not spiritually mature enough to understand it. Or they might say that God is showing tough love to help you grow. They isolate people. The cults often try to cut their followers off from the outside world. That way, if you start to question things, you don't have anyone to turn to. And if the cult doesn't show you love, you'll think that you're the problem, and not having any language to think anything else is their goal. They use fear. If you try to leave the cult, they might say that you're giving up on love. They might tell you that you'll be punished by God and that you're risking your salvation. So you might feel like you must stay in the cult, even if you don't feel the love that the cult is supposedly all about. Love is a force we should always strive to get and give, no matter our beliefs or backgrounds. As someone myself who has struggled with loving both others and myself, I know firsthand how difficult it can be to put this into practice. It wasn't until I started to understand love as air to breathe more than a target to achieve that I began to see a shift in my ability to love. Love does require patience, kindness, and understanding. It does ask us to step out of our perspective and into the shoes of others, and to see them as they are, and to love them despite their flaws and shortcomings. But loving others is only half the equation. we must also learn to love ourselves. We must practice what we preach. And if we do not love ourselves, we will struggle to love others sustainably. Self-love is not selfish. It is a necessary component of a healthy lifestyle. Unfortunately, as I've learned through personal experience, the message of love can sometimes be twisted, manipulated, particularly in the context of certain religious groups, but frankly, by all matters of people who are viewing love as a means to an end or a badge of loyalty. Cult leaders redefine love to fit their agenda, using fear and isolation to keep their followers in line. But true love, the kind of love that I believe in, is not exclusive, nor does it require adherence to a certain belief system. It is a universal breath that transcends all boundaries. In the end, love is not something that can be fully explained or understood. It is a force that we can only experience and share with others. It is a mission that we must all undertake, learning to love ourselves and others. You know, dear listeners, when we think about the world and all its complexities, it's easy to feel overwhelmed and lost. But amidst all the chaos and confusion, there is one force that can make a real difference. Love. Love has the power to heal wounds, bridge divides, and make us better people. But more than all that, love is the light that illuminates the darkness of life's challenges. It's the glue that holds together the fragile bonds of relationships. It's the antidote to the poison of hate and fear that infects our world. Love nurtures and enriches our entire identities. It cannot be achieved through submission, ideas of perfection, or performance. Love is the foundation of all that is good and beautiful. The Beatles truly said it best. All you need is love.
If you'd like to learn more about this podcast or other work I'm doing, go to thecultofchristianity.com. If you'd like to support this podcast, listen, follow, share, and consider subscribing for $5 through Spotify for additional content, or give as much or as little as you can to support this work through links in the show's notes. Every dollar helps further this important discussion as well as start other exciting projects. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep love in your life, hope in your heart, and searching in your soul.